Hello everybody and welcome back to Rule the Roost podcast. You can't get enough of my voice at the moment, I'm sure you can't, because I'm just, big, massive attention seeker that loves the sound of it. So, whatever, deal with it. If I can put it to good use and other people like it, then I'm not going to apologise for that, alright? Why should I? Why should I? It's a free country. But, yeah, it's not all just about me today. It is one of the normal podcasts. I've got a guest on this week. I'm happy to say hello to Cosmo Teare of the N17 podcast. Hello, mate. Welcome to the show. How are you doing?
Hello, mate. Yeah, very well. Absolute pleasure to be on. I've been a fan of your pod, of yours and Raj's for a long time. So, it's a pleasure to get a call up.
See, this is a word to anybody, to like listeners. If you want to get your way into my good books, just flatter me. That's it. Do you know what I mean? I was saying at the top, I'm an attention seeker and all that. Need this validation, need the ego stroke. So I'm glad you're a listener, Cosmo. That's great, mate. And I actually am a listener of your podcast as well. Everybody, I'll give you the plug up top. Listen to Cosmo's pod. It's really, really good. It's good to hear like the sort of next generation of podcasters, mate, coming through. That I thought all you young'uns were all TikTokers and vloggers and all that sort of thing, but no, there's still some like, you're keeping the podcast fire burning, lads. So that's what I like to. So I like to hear. When did you guys start it actually?
So we started it in, I think it was 2019, and it was kind of like in the embers of the Pochettino era. I think our first episode, actually, it wasn't at the complete start of the season. It was after we beat Palace 4-0. And I was kind of like, oh, this is great. Like, this podcasting lark is easy. Like, we're back. It's all going to be all right. Poch is going to turn it around. And then, we all know what happened next. That turned into a bin fire. Then we got Jose coming in and the pandemic and stuff. But yeah, it's been a fun few years podcasting.
It's been a bit of a ride, hasn't it, mate? Like when you put it like that, really, when you kind of look back on it all. But hopefully the phoenix from the flames, from the ashes of all that, is Tottenham Hotspur, managed by Antonio Conte, going on to win the Premier League. But we don't want to get ahead of ourselves. It's a bit Arsenal doing that at the moment, isn't it? But I would be interested to know, mate, how are you feeling about everything at the moment? Like, obviously we beat Wolves, and it seems to have, even though it's Tottenham Hotspur 7 points up on last season, it still seems to have, let's just say, divided opinions. Some people are saying we are making these games too hard. Some people are angry that Leeds managed to beat Chelsea and we didn't. People such as myself, I'm pretty happy that Spurs are winning ugly, that we're getting results across the line. But what do you feel? Would you like to have seen a bit more flair about what Tottenham are doing?
Well, the first thing I'd say on the Chelsea thing is that you just got to ignore what they do in the next game, because we always know that they're going to turn up against us. I mean, even when it was Mourinho v Lampard, Mourinho made Lampard look like a master tactician. So that was inevitable that they just go on and get pumped the next game. So I'm not too worried about that fact. But yeah, I was kind of thinking before I came on, how do I evaluate this season? It is a tricky one, because without doubt, it has been a bit of a slow start. I mean, even with the 4-1 against Southampton, while we went on to play great, again, there was a bit of a slow start there. And I think that is becoming a little bit of a pattern of our play, that we are starting the first half of games quite slowly. But you can kind of flip that, and you can say that that's a testament to how Conte's set us up, and that our fitness is good, and that we can come back strongly in the second half. But to tell you the truth, mate, I'm really quite in the middle. I think it could go either way, because on the one hand, and Conte was keen to point this out, we've gone from picking up 0 points last season in his fixtures to now picking up 7. But then on the other side, I can't help but kind of be a bit scarred by past Spurs experiences. And it does kind of remind me slightly, I'm not saying this is going to happen, but I remember under AVB in his second season, when we were just winning 1-0 through scoring penalties via Soldado. That was kind of giving me a similar vibe in terms of, yeah, we're grinding out results and we're getting results, but you either turn the corner, which I think we will. I think we will massively improve going forward, or I don't know, it could stay a bit turgid. I don't know. What do you think?
I think so. One of my main things on it, because I do know what you're saying, but I do think, I look at it, right, we've just played Chelsea away, like their first game of the season, first home game of the season against Tottenham. I mean, there's no bigger game for them. As much as they want to say that there isn't. Spurs is their Spurs at Stamford Bridge is their biggest game of the season. The atmosphere, the pressure on our team there to turn up and perform, and on their team being propelled forwards. The fact that we sucked the life out of that, we scored against them in the 96th minute, I think is huge. I think it's a huge moment for Tottenham. In terms of Wolves, we know what Wolves are. We know that Wolves are a horrible, horrible team to play against for Spurs. They did beat us last year, and they've improved. They've improved their team from last year. I thought they actually played all right, but really, we contained them. We contained them pretty well. I do think, my biggest issue with it is I feel like we got overloaded in midfield. We got overloaded in midfield against Chelsea, and it seemed to be that Wolves did exactly the same thing again. Now, my wider fear at the back of this is, are other teams looking at this thinking, Conte is so rigid in his system, in his approach, we know how we can get at Tottenham, attack those central two, and you nullify Tottenham. They can't really do anything. They can't get a foothold in the game. And I guess that's where Conte earns his money, right? Conte and his team earn their money. They have to look for solutions in this. Whether that solution is Yves Bissouma coming in, taking place of Højbjerg. That feels harsh because I think Højbjerg was one of our better players against Wolves actually the other day. But, we saw him switch it up against Chelsea to good effect. Whether or not I can't see him. In my opinion, he's not ditching. We're not going to stay 4-3-3. To me, it's not a thing. He's going to stay with his five at the back. That's Conte, and we might see it in varying degrees throughout the season. But this kind of clamouring for a 4-3-3, maybe I don't even think we've got the personnel for it, to be honest. So it will be interesting. I mean, at the moment, I'm kind of. Would you say though? I want to talk about them more in depth bit later on, but do you feel there's a little bit of you, just if being honest, Cosmo, a little bit of you that's kind of just sort of feeling a little bit of the stress of Arsenal looking all right at the start of the season? Because that's kind of the vibe I get from a lot of the Tottenham fan base at the moment, is that we would probably be a lot more comfortable doing what we're doing right now if Arsenal weren't looking quite barnstorming at the moment, if you know what I mean.
I mean, they are looking good, but kind of my philosophy with that is that I just try and ignore what they do. Like, I bumped into a bunch of them at the pub after the Spurs game and after their game, and they're just getting so ahead of themselves. It's ridiculous, and I kind of think we kind of saw what they're capable of in terms of how they crumbled last season. I find it hard to take a manager seriously who's going around holding a light bulb going on about Thomas Edison, when you compare that to kind of like the cool head of Conte. I don't think that's going to be the main threat this season. Obviously they are looking good. I don't know what the hell has happened to Gabby Jesus, because he looks like a completely different player to what he was at City, and in a way what he might have been if he came in at Spurs. I think he would have kind of been this bit part role guy who plays on the right wing for us every now and then. But at Arsenal, I don't know, it is quite scary how good he's actually looking as a number 9, which I didn't see coming. So no doubt they've improved, especially if they do get Neto from Wolves as well. It could be a danger. But honestly, I think if our ambitions are looking at maybe challenging City and Liverpool, then that needs to be the focus. And I think if we're battling that out with Arsenal, then I think something's probably gone wrong on our behalf. Maybe I'm really underrating them.
No,
but
I'm
that's
with
the way
you,
I
mate.
see it.
I mean, look at it like Gabriel Jesus. I don't want to sort of dwell too much on Arsenal at the top end of this, but I can't help it, and everyone's talking about it at the moment. Gabriel Jesus, though, look, he does look brilliant. He is great, but is he going to replicate this across every? There's a lot of pressure on him, man. He's pretty much, take him out of the team. What you replace him with? Eddie Nketiah, decent young player, but we can't come and. I think even your most ardent Arsenal fan isn't going to claim that Nketiah's on that same sort of level that Jesus is playing at the moment. But is this just Jesus joining a new club, wanting to show everybody what he's about, really giving it his all for these sort of opening games? But is he going to manage to maintain this level of form throughout the entire season? Because it seems, again, like this Arsenal system is very dependent on him playing the way he's playing right now. And Thursday, Sunday rotation, bring in Carling Cup games, not Carling Cup, what is it, Carabao Cup now, fucking hell, Grandad, come on. FA Cup games down the way, like, that's a lot of football on his shoulders. I'm not sure Arsenal have got the kind of the full kind of depth there that Tottenham do. And, you know, we're seeing it, like, Richarlison might be being kind of, like, drip-fed into the team. I like that. It's a long season. It's a marathon, not a sprint, and whatever other old cliches you want to throw at it. But it's true, right? Like you're saying about Conte and his cool head. You know, to me, there just seems to be a lot more structure at Tottenham, and that's kind of what I do like about it. And I don't fully kind of... I do know what you're saying about the AVB thing. Like, you can feel that way, but that always felt like that's the best that we could do. Like Spurs were getting that across the line, whereas now under Conte, it feels like we're getting started. We're going up through the gears, and already we're 7 points up on what we were last season. And I think that's the crucial part to cling on to with Spurs at the moment, just in my opinion anyway.
Yeah, no, 100%. Maybe I laboured the AVB point a bit too far, because I 100% agree with you, man. I've been watching the Last Dance again recently.
Oh, yeah.
And maybe I've been getting a bit ahead of myself watching that, but it does kind of like set the Bulls up as like this franchise who had all these good players that they were ready to go. They were just about getting there, and they had a really good manager before they brought Phil Jackson in. And that's like a really common thing in basketball, where there'll be a manager or a coach that's known as like the guy before the guy.
Yeah.
And I kind of do think Conte might be the guy after the guy. We've had 2 duds in between those guys, but I mean, Nuno barely even counts, and Jose, probably best not to talk about him too much, but yeah, I do think this is different, man. I really do.
It is strange, isn't it? Because there is just something about, there's an intangible level of, almost like I sort of said it before, like an unearned confidence that comes with what Tottenham are doing right now. And all I can liken it to is like one of my mates who is a Liverpool supporter, when they kind of got Fabinho, Van Dijk, and they got Alisson through the door. They suddenly went from being a bit of a kind of banter FC, getting done by Spurs at Wembley, all that sort of thing. Like a couple of good players in Salah and Mane, but you're like, well, what else have they got to them? It's not much there. And it kind of feels like Tottenham have done that, right? We always had Son and Kane, but meh. Lloris as well. I'm not going to sort of do him dirty, but it just seems like there's an assurance that's been bled into Tottenham now, and I really felt that run towards for Spurs to be in the Champions League now. Like, we can make fun of Arsenal, and Arsenal did definitely bottle it to a degree. I mean, they definitely did bottle it, that Newcastle game. But just the fact that we managed to put that pressure on them to bottle that from where we were sitting before was just a level of strength in Tottenham, in their belief in their kind of play, everything about them that I haven't seen for years at Tottenham. I haven't seen since peak Pochettino, 16, 17, 17, 18 Pochettino. And even then, as people have said before, like, it always felt like there was an air of like, oh, you know, let's keep going with this sort of plucky underdog performing above ourselves. But now it feels like, no, we got Harry Kane, we got Son, we got Lloris, we got an Eric Dyer that seems to just suddenly be like putting his injury stuff behind him, putting all his positional doubts behind him, and is just focusing on what he does best. And I think we're reaping the rewards of that. Ben Davies as well, playing in his preferred position. I mean, I know a lot of people are always going to say he can be upgraded, and I in the bigger picture do feel that way, but for now I don't feel it's a critical replacement. I think he's a very, very good player. Romero, you know, what more can we say about him? Davinson Sanchez, you know, I think somebody said, is it like 7 hours of football Davinson Sanchez has played and hasn't conceded in? I want to say that. It's some sort of mad stat like that.
It was around that, yeah.
So, you know, what did you make of Dav, actually? Because I'm often quite sort of scathing of him. And I still kind of feel, my thing with Dav, just to put it out there, is I feel that it's great, and it's great seeing him do what he's doing. He did have a great performance, but I'm always just waiting for Dav to have that moment, you know, where it's not great anymore.
Yeah, and I think he always does have that moment in him. But I thought he was fantastic. I mean, some of the blocks he put in were just phenomenal. And I think what we do lose with Dav, especially when he comes in, is that you just can't replace the kind of creativity that Romero can give you, like coming out the back. So that's always going to be quite a significant drop off. But what you do get in Dav, I think, is a solid defender. And I think in the role that he's playing at the moment, where he's not playing every single week and he is kind of like the principal backup, you are going to kind of limit the amount of risks that he has. Of course, when he's rusty, maybe he's more likely to make that mistake. But when he's not playing every week, I think he's more than capable as a backup. And yeah, he looked really good. And I actually think for the period that Romero's out, obviously that's kind of a little bit debated as to how long that's actually going to be. I know his team and him were saying, I can come back straight away. Whereas Conte's being a bit more cautious, which I think is a good thing. I don't think the games are the worst games for him to miss. I think it's come at a kind of like a kind time in the fixture list. Because like you said a bit earlier, like we're still pretty much only in one game a week right now. And when I was like looking ahead to our next game against Forest, I saw that they're playing in the Carabao Cup tomorrow. So it's going to start and it's going to get crazy before the World Cup, the amount of games that are going to be played. So we're going to need people like Dav. And yeah, I was kind of surprised by how good he was, to be fair. Yeah, he was solid.
He did that one brilliant tackle in the first half when what's his name? It was one of is it Guedes? What's he got? Wolves' new signing that they made,
isn't it?
Yeah, potentially. Yeah, I'm just doing like my dad does when he says.
I'm a little bit the same, I can't lie. I mean, not all the time, but on this one, I think it has kind of passed me by a little bit. I mean, it's Wolves signing another Portuguese player, you know. So yeah, without getting too your dad about it, it's a lot of them, you know.
Yeah. Coming here, bringing that piri chicken over. You know what I mean? But they, he did that brilliant one-on-one tackle. I think there's this sort of conversation at the moment, right, when people are talking about squad options for Tottenham, and you've touched on it there, like the amount of games that are going to be played in like such a crazy succession this year, before the World Cup and after it as well, and the World Cup itself, really, for half the players in the Premier League. That we need to stop looking at every single player that either Spurs are linked to or any player that Spurs have on their bench or in the squad at the moment as being, well, he's no better than, this was one of the things that, like, when we signed Richarlison, there was always talk of, well, does he improve Son or Kane? No, but we're not spending 200 mil on Mbappe. And that's the sort of, and is Mbappe, like, even in that instance, it would be debatable as to whether or not he improves Son or Kane. And people are going to call me deluded for saying that type of thing, but the level that we have in players like Son or Kane, you can't be looking to, like, build a squad that improves on them at this point in time. Like, you flesh that squad out with, as you say, with the fact in mind that we've got so many games to play. I did want to sort of talk about Harry Kane, because obviously another record-breaking goal, the most goals for any single Premier League team now, is Harry Kane. He's overtaken Sergio Aguero. I mean, what more can we say about the man, really, Cosmo? I mean, he's just the best player I've ever seen at Tottenham now, on balance. He feels like he's got a bit of the best things of all the best players we've ever had at Spurs, really. His finishing is, unbelievable. His, you got a bit of like the kind of the passing ability or just reading of the game of somebody like Modric. You've got the big moments, the dynamic kind of presence of somebody like Bale. Maybe not the kind of same dynamic speed and kind of directness of Bale, but still, he can twat a ball, basically, is what I want to say in short.
Yeah.
I mean, he's impossible to replace for us, right? So you just enjoy the ride?
100%. I mean, no one would be able to replace Harry Kane, and we're so lucky to have a player like that. I mean, in what world, especially in Tottenham, in what world, like, does someone come through from your academy who no one really fancied and he ends up having a career like he's done? It's like you say, like, he can do everything. And I actually think Kane's underrated, to be honest, by other fans, and to an extent even by Spurs fans as well. And I think it's because he does every part of the game so well. It almost makes it like a little bit banal in a way. Like, he gets that header against Wolves, and it's so efficient and it's so good. The movement is so good that you're just like, oh, like he's just scored another tap-in. But then you watch it again and you see the way he spun Collins, and we're so lucky to have him. I actually think this version of Kane, probably last season, he showed flashes of it, but the season before, where he is playing that kind of 9.5, 10 role, it's incredible, man. I love the way he can drop into that space and pick a pass. Yeah, so lucky to have him, and I think he's underrated, to be honest, in the world of football world. Like, I was having a debate with one of my mates about, we were talking about who is going to be the best player in the world, because obviously Messi and Ronaldo, well, Ronaldo's completely finished, let's be honest, but Messi probably, yeah, he's getting older, and he was saying Benzema is the best player in the world, and I was like, I don't even think Benzema's better than Kane. Like, maybe that's a bit of an outlandish statement, maybe I'm getting ahead of myself, but I think Kane, as a striker, he's just got so many strings to his bow. Yeah, we're so lucky to have him, man.
Yeah, what's your favourite goal of his, out of interest?
My favourite goal of his, for me, it was the 5-3 against Chelsea. That one where he struck it from range. And I think you could argue that, I don't know if he got 2 or 3 that game, but that one where he turned and then slotted one in at far post was maybe technically better. But for me, that 5-3 against Chelsea, that's where something really turned for Tottenham. And you do get these moments where, like, especially under Poch, I think that was where I was like, okay, we might actually have something here, because they were flying under Mourinho and we were like this young up-and-coming team. I was also, I was watching it at an ex's house and her mum supported Chelsea.
All the better, all the better.
Yeah, and it just made it, I was actually streaming it on my laptop. It was around like Christmas, wasn't it? It was like around New Year's Day. I was streaming it on my laptop, and I just remember not really being able to believe my eyes when that went in. Like, I just went absolutely ballistic. I was like screaming, running around with the laptop. That was a great game. To be honest, that was one of my favourite Spurs games, when we beat Chelsea 5-3, and I think that was where we were like, okay, this guy's world class. So maybe slightly that's more of like an emotional one, but for me, that's my favourite goal for him.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, that's what I was thinking. When you sort of remember like Bale announcing himself against Inter Milan, like you kind of say, it did change in that Chelsea game, didn't it? Because before that point, you were kind of like, oh, you've got that young, it's good for this young Harry Kane lad from the academy. It's nice to see him come on, score a few goals. Maybe if he's an option we've got around the kind of squad. I tell you what, I put him in this a similar bracket to like how people sort of maybe talk about Skip now. Harry Kane was starting to get a few appearances, and we were like, yeah, if he can be a good squad option for us. We've had a lot of shit with kind of Adebayor, with Soldado, and if there's a young homegrown lad here that can score, sort of pop up with goals, let's ride this momentum and see how it goes. But we probably need to think about getting a big established striker in at some point. And then that game came along, and you were suddenly like, actually, no, he's a player, isn't he? Like, this isn't just a kind of like flash in the pan. And then obviously a lot of people had been saying it for years. A lot of people who were more interested in youth football and all that type of stuff had pre-warned us about Harry Kane, had told us kind of the ability that was there. But even in that instance, a lot can change in like a young player's career, and that kind of transition to playing at actual top level Premier League football, it just isn't for everybody. It's just as much a mental thing as it is a physical or technical thing. Everybody knows this by now, but you just suddenly saw in Harry Kane, like he was seizing that opportunity, right, and he just hasn't stopped ever since. And I think my main thing about Harry Kane is that I honestly don't think, I'm pretty certain, there's never been a player that, there was a different thing with Ledley. Ledley was always a shame that he was just injured all the time, but before every single game, I remember the relief, getting the team sheet up and seeing that Ledley King was starting. There would always be a bit of a sigh of relief that maybe we wouldn't lose today because Ledley King was playing, and that was kind of, you've got a similar thing with Kane in that even when he does go for these streaks when he's not playing as well, I always think, well, at least we've got Harry Kane though. He will come good. He will score goals for us. Get a penalty, Harry Kane will score it. You don't really need to worry about that with him. I just think his consistency is something that we just cannot take for granted. We can't take for granted at all, because you really are looking at like a £150 million, £200 million striker. You are, that, like you say, has just come through our academy. The amount of goals he scored is unbelievable. Tottenham maybe even now would struggle to sign a player. We're not. Haaland wasn't going to come to us, was he? Mbappe isn't going to come to. Mbappe literally laughed at a Spider-Man premiere about the idea of coming to Tottenham, which I do actually take a bit of umbrage with. Do you know what I mean? But you get it, right? And a player in that stratosphere isn't going to come to Tottenham, but we've got him. He's here. So I agree with you. I do think he is underrated, but I think greatness is always normalised, right? It takes. I think people sort of talk about like Leo Messi having had a bad. I remember there was one year in particular at Barcelona when people said, he's not had a good year actually, Leo Messi. And then you looked and he'd still scored like 40 odd goals for the club that season. Do you know what I mean? It's just it's always easy because these sort of heroes set their own bar so high, so absolutely high. And funnily enough, I do feel that like his greatness in a way has overshadowed the greatness of Heung-min Son, who I do actually feel quite sorry for. I do feel sorry for Son. Obviously, I think playing alongside Kane has been a godsend for his career, just as much as at the same time it's probably overshadowed the fact that Son, in his own right, is one of the greatest footballers Tottenham Hotspur have ever had. However, he's not had the greatest start to the season. Where do you stand on him at the moment, Cosmo? I'm just sort of interested to know how you're feeling about his first few games.
I mean, on Son, I absolutely love Son. I think he's probably my favourite of this era. Again, that's more of like an emotional thing, and maybe it's a bit sacrilegious because I know we probably should say, Kane is without doubt, my favourite player. But Son, there's just something about him, man. Like, he's such a great personality. He works so hard. He scores amazing goals.
He properly loves the club, doesn't he, as well? Like, properly.
Yeah. Exactly. If it was in any other era, this guy would be our absolute number one hero. So, like you say, he is just a little bit unlucky, or lucky as well that he's played along with Kane. But he definitely deserves to have his name out in his own right as well. I think where like I really fell in love. Well, I always loved Son, but like where I was like, okay, Sonny is more than just the rest of Desk. Sonny is Sonny. Was when Kane got injured in that Champions League run and he was scoring those goals against City, and you're like, okay, this guy is world class. Because it actually took quite long for people to acknowledge that Son was world class, and I think he is. That trip down memory lane aside, he's been really poor so far this season, and he looks really off it. His touch just looks all over the place. It's just so often that the ball's kind of like fizzed into him and he's kind of controlling it. Just oddly, just something about him just doesn't look right now. I don't know where that comes from, but it's interesting. You were saying about Richarlison earlier and like how it is a squad game and Richarlison is going to be pushing people. I think on form right now, Richarlison does deserve to start over Son. Would I personally make that call? I'm not sure, because I think Sonny's the type of personality where he needs to feel loved and he needs to kind of have an arm around the shoulder a bit more. Then again, his dad is a psychopath, so maybe not on that. But I think we'd be better off leaving him in for 2 or 3 games, letting him kind of ride out this bad patch of form and seeing if he can turn it around. Because, I mean, just look at the end of last season, the amount of goals he was scoring, he's earned his keep, man. And I was listening to the extra episode you did, and when you were saying that there was some guy in front of you like coating him off, I was like, just these people have such short memories, man. And I think we have to let them ride it out. What do you reckon? Would you mix it up?
To me, you've nailed it there, mate. You've got to stick with Sonny, in my opinion, because he just not only do him and Kane have their kind of relationship that they have, is you just got to stick by these players. Like he's stuck by us, basically. He could have. I defy anybody that says that Heung-min Son wouldn't have been signed by Real Madrid or by Liverpool, even anybody like that. They would have taken him. Any club in world football, in my opinion, would have taken Heung-min Son. Even PSG with their embarrassment of riches, anybody would have him. He's stuck with Spurs. He feels indebted to the club, and you've got to stick by him. I mean, I don't think by his own standards, I think by anybody's standards, really, his past few performances have not been great, but. If we look at this, you look at this at the start of a season, it always looks worse, in my opinion. Had he been having a quiet spell in October, I don't think people are going to be as asked. They would still kind of look at it, but we've always known that Son has this kind of ability to be a bit streaky in him. I'd be interested to know your perspective on this, because obviously a lot of people will often say, let's get in competition, let's have players breathing down the squad's neck, and I do agree that I don't think that's not an incorrect statement to have, but what I mean from that is that people always think that by default that is immediately going to make a player perform better. This is probably the first time now with Richarlison there that Son has truly had his place under threat. He's competing for a place, should we say. And there's plenty of games to go around. It's a squad game now. It's not a starting 11 game, right? We know this. But still, there is a starting 11. If it comes to a cup final, there's a strongest 11 that the manager is going to pick. Do you think Son is maybe feeling the pressure of not only having won the Golden Boot and feeling the need to replicate that at a similar level to last season? Do you think he could be potentially feeling the weight of kind of, well, I've got this exceptional player in Richarlison now vying for my position in the team?
That's a good point. I haven't really thought of it like that, but I don't know. To be honest, I think if you're such an elite level athlete, which he is, you have to expect that at some stage. I think it is inevitable. It is going to come along, and I do think the competition will be good for him in the long run. Yeah, I do think, like you say, it's been exacerbated by the fact that this is at the start of the season. If it was midway through, you'd be able to kind of let him ride it out. And then also there would be like these cup games that we're talking about where Richarlison can go in, and if he makes himself undroppable, then that's just going to be the case. But yeah, I don't know, man. Possibly. I was also wondering if maybe he's feeling the effects of the pre-season a little bit, because we did have that really brutal pre-season. It's their first pre-season under Conte, and he was a bit late back, and he met them out there in Korea on a bit of a kind of, sort of like a PR activity thing. I don't know whether possibly, I'm just speculating, that could have affected him a little bit. I'm not sure.
There was always potential, and it seems to be a mixture of that, doesn't it? Because he does look a bit leggy, and I'm surprised like more people haven't picked up on this. They're kind of more talking about him disappearing into his own head a bit, which I don't think is invalid, but I do think he just looks a bit leggy. So I think that tiredness, but is a factor. I don't completely discount the idea that he's sort of playing within himself a bit though, because there was that one opportunity. Did you see it when I think Kane got that free kick that he took pretty quickly, and he kind of booted it up into the air, and I was wondering what the fuck's he done as he sort of miskicked it. But then actually sort of Son almost come out. It was right in front of me as well, but Son almost looked like he sort of came out of nowhere, got a touch on it, took a brilliant touch. I was like, yes, this is it. Like Sonny's about to bang it home now, and he just absolutely fluffed the finish. It was awful. It was practically like one-on-one. He did have pressure from either side of him, but we've seen Son just slot those home plenty of times. So I do wonder if something's weighing on him a bit. But like we were saying with Kane at the top, I back Son to sort of come good. I back Son to come through out the other side. As we've seen him plenty of times have these patches where he hasn't done well, and people forget that even players like Gareth Bale for Tottenham was so fucking streaky. Gareth Bale went through plenty of games where he didn't look particularly great, but still always kind of came up with the goods on sort of on a net balance thing at the end of each season. Yeah, that's sort of the way you got to look at it. And I think Son has got plenty of credit in the bank, right? I'm going to stop with these sort of money metaphors, but he's still got plenty of credit with us. And I just think I agree with you. Stick with him. Keep Richarlison hungry. Keep kind of like, you don't need to have like a massively detrimental effect on Son. Richarlison's going to get minutes. There's going to be plenty of minutes coming up. And as Conte keeps making that point, the original starting 11, they've had 7 months of him. A lot of these players are still new to the team, and this kind of plays into what we were talking about Spurs, their slow start and everything like that, is that there's still a lot of players that are yet to get up to speed with us. We've got Basuma coming through. We've got Perisic, who's starting to look quite good. But in that, actually, I'll be interested to know, what did you make of Perisic in the game in overall against Wolves?
Yeah, I mean, he did look a little bit slow to start at first in the first half. But again, we got to factor in, this is his home debut. And even though he is like a seasoned professional, he is still settling into a team. So I think that's kind of normal that someone's not going to start like completely bang on. What I do love about Perisic is I just feel like there's certain players where you can just see that their quality. And I think where that really dawned on me was in one of the preseason friendlies against Rangers, and he just took that shot from nowhere, just absolutely spanked the ball from like 30 yards. And I'm like, okay, this is different, because that was Reguilon's never doing that. Cess, bless him, he's never doing that. I think I've got no worries about Perisic. And one of the things which actually watching the highlights back as well, that header that he's got is actually to assist Kane is a bit underrated, man, because I was thinking like, you know, a lot of the listeners, a lot of us, we kind of play football to, I don't know, 7-a-side or whatever. Can you imagine someone smacking the ball at your head that hard? And it's
horrible, isn't it? Like...
Exactly. And he can just duck and perfectly flick it over for someone to just knock it in the net. That's nuts. Like, that is actually like, that's a great bit of skill, but it's not getting talked about. But I think, yeah, he's going to be mustard for us, I think.
You're right though. Heading the ball, honestly, is easily the most awful bit of actually playing football. Like, it's horrible. It's disgusting. I've always gotten a headache off of it every time, and it will always just land on the... I'm shit at football, to be fair, so it's not really saying much, but I hate it. Never liked it. Never enjoyed it.
It is horrible, man. It's always like, I don't know, you just feel a bit weird after. Yeah. Yeah.
But then, like you see kind of... I mean, I'll tell you what I noticed most about Perisic, actually, is that I appreciate... The thing is, I hadn't drunk before the game, so it wasn't just like, I was just pissed in the stadium because I've been drinking since 10 a.m. for the lunchtime kickoff. Like, I was watching the game sort of like with fresh eyes and everything like that, and I was appreciating a lot of what Perisic was doing. He was obviously very good. But then when I watched the game back on Match of the Day, I was like, fucking hell. Like seeing someone like Perisic's touches and the way he was kind of gliding past people, I was thinking like, this didn't translate from what I was watching there, seeing it in its full kind of like majesty, if you like. It's unbelievable. I mean, I said it kind of a couple of weeks ago when we signed him. Like, I think we should be under no illusions that like he is one of our best players already. Like
100%.
Everything he's got behind him, his experience, but his kind of his ability, and I just think people need to not get kind of blindsided by his age and all that type of thing. I mean, look at the geezer. He's in unbelievable shape.
He's got a face of an uncle and then just this unbelievable body. Like it's mental. But like on just how good he is, I followed Nima, the journalist who was on Extra Inch when Conte joined, and he was just purring over Conte. And I actually joined one of his like Inter Milan Twitter spaces just randomly one day. And oh my God, the meltdown that they were having about losing Perisic. They were like,
really?
Yeah, they were like, we haven't replaced him. This is a guy who was our best player last season, arguably the best player in the Serie A. And I was like, oh my God, like we don't realise how good this guy actually is. I mean, 7 goals and 8 assists last season from left wing back. It's he's going to be good, man.
Look, mate, I'm not elevating him to this level per se, but I totally appreciate Gareth Bale is one of, if not probably the best British footballer of all time. But when I was looking at kind of a lot of Perisic's kind of highlights, and just from having watched him play before, there is an air of like Bale about him in the kind of the way he just attacks a game, and can just kind of just that strength and that kind of like the upper body strength and speed and just kind of directness he has about his play. And almost just the way he can just hit a football without breaking his stride that's what, like you were saying, love Sessegnon, but he ain't going to be doing that for us. And they're very different. We saw Sessegnon come on toward the end of the game, and he had a fucking brilliant performance against Adama Traore. Like, he pocketed him completely. He's definitely learning from Perisic. So, you know, it doesn't need to be a competition. And all players are different. I think Sessegnon, you know, I just think he's a good player. I think he's a good young player that I'm happy to see at Spurs. And if he can learn more from Perisic, that's great. But Perisic now, I mean, I was surprised to see him not start against Chelsea, but here we go. You know, I think we're kind of we're in the Perisic era now, I would imagine, and I'm here for it, man, because I think he is a really, really special footballer, and he is just one of those players that I just think like opposition teams and stuff they're just ignoring. They're not really kind of thinking about that, as in they're not seeing Spurs as a threat. because they're seeing like, oh, who have they signed? What have they really done? Liverpool have got Luis Diaz, or Arsenal are going to sign Neto or whatever. And I just think Perisic has just been ignored by so many people, and I think that's good for Spurs. I think it's good for us to just kind of continue to go under the radar like that, especially with a player like him, because I really do think he's unbelievable. One thing I did want to, and I don't want to go into it too much because I do get it's a very like divisive subject and stuff, but there's a bit of booing at half time, which for the second home game of the season, considering we weren't losing, we're actually doing all right in the league, I did find a bit weird. Did you really have any sort of perspective on it?
Yeah, 100%. Like, I've always been really against like booing full stop, really. I think there are times when I think, like the Nuno substitution, that was probably warranted, but in general, I'm there to support the team, man. Like, I'm not there to boo. And it's kind of like, it's a little bit like what you were saying earlier, like, as probably one of the younger podcasters and might expect us to be doing all like TikTok dances and whatnot. I do feel like I do have a bit of Yadar streak in me, and I've like always believed in like, I know I'm not really one to go to the football and boo, and it took me back, man. It took me back. Like, the whistle blew for half time, and it was quite. I was in the south stand. It was a bit muted in the south stand where I was personally, but there was some guy in front of me booing, and I was a bit like, oh, like, I was a bit shocked by it because, yeah, of course, we didn't play well. We were definitely the second best team, but I don't know, man. It seems very spoiled to me, and I also think, in a way, what is Conte thinking when he hears that? Not that we need to kind of always being. We don't always need to impress Conte and be like, oh, like we have to act this way for Conte or whatever. Which I do feel like some of the fans were like at first when he first came in, but it just sends the wrong message, man. I don't get that at all.
I agree with you completely, mate. It's I'm mostly against it, but I've seen kind of people raise arguments about it, and there are times when you can understand it, but just now, off the back of us sort of getting Champions League football at the expense of Arsenal, the effort that the team put into everything at the tail end of last season, and where we are right now, it's an exciting time for Spurs. So I don't get it. It was 0-0. We weren't losing 2-0. We're not like where West Ham are now. I haven't scored a goal all season. Rock bottom at the. I can understand fans booing in that instance to a degree, but even then, I don't do it. I'm there to support the team, and it's not I'm better than you because I don't do it or anything. Whatever. People support the game in their own kind of way, but that is not support. Booing the team at 0-0 at half time in the second home game of the season when we're having a good year isn't support of any kind. And like you say, it's not about kind of impressing Conte, but you can imagine like the amount of work they are all putting in. He would be thinking like, fuck this lot, man. But I do think as well, though, he's the type of manager that will, if that sort of stuff carries on, he will have a pop at the fans to doing that type of thing. And I think people will listen to him. So, maybe he will say something. In terms of talking about Tottenham's squad, in talking about sort of the season going ahead, do you think we need some new players? Because we're seeing now, like, I think Lo Celso's gone, Brian Hill looks like he's about to go, and Ndombele has gone or is literally about to go. Conte was sort of saying, we've got a squad. If we lose more players, then we'll need more players in. One might argue that the three that are going, he didn't really even consider a part of the squad. But ultimately, would you like to see Spurs add another player, a couple more players? If so, whereabouts? What's the sort of priority for you?
I kind of agree with Conte, really. I think if Hill goes, then I do think we do need to bring in another player, because we paid quite a lot of money for Hill. That's something that goes quite under the radar. I think it was 25 million plus Lamella. So you're looking at like 35, 40 million for him. So it's not insignificant. And I still think he could do a job. So yeah, I think he would definitely need to be replaced. Other than that, I think maybe possibly at centre-back, we could do with some more numbers there, potentially. Because we've seen with Romero, even though Sanchez played well, say you increase that to 2 injuries, then I think we're starting to get a little bit kind of short there. One of the positions which I do find interesting is whether I'll be interested to get your thoughts as to whether like you think we should bring someone in to play as a number 10 or like a creative midfielder, because that seems to be something people are saying on Twitter a lot. And I agreed with you when you were saying about, I don't think we should bring in a player like Maddison, because you're looking at like 50 million plus outlay. And I know we're saying it's like a squad game now, but you're looking at someone who's going to be expecting to start games. And we're a 3-4-3 team. And I'm quite happy for us to be wedded to that philosophy and trying to get it to work. I think every now and then just chopping and changing it between 3-5-2 and 3-4-3 is actually a lot more disruptive than people would think.
Yeah.
But on that, we have been linked with Malinovsky, and I think in terms of like a profile of someone who is probably a little bit more prepared to come in and be a squad player, I think he would be a better option than kind of breaking the bank for someone like Maddison or maybe Paquetá or something like that. So maybe, I don't know. Do you think we need a number 10?
Do you know what the funny thing is? I'd never even heard of Ruslan Malinovsky before we were linked to him the other day, and just from, like you said, kind of getting a sort of sense of his profile from looking at, you know, all the places we all look, kind of these sort of scout websites, Transfer Market and all that sort of stuff, watching the YouTube compilations, there's something about him that I do really like the look of, that he looks like he is kind of built to slot into this team, that he looks big, he looks strong. He plays well with his back to goal. Looks like he can hold up play pretty well, but he does have that, like, those little flashes of like creative flair in him. There's quite a few little, like, lovely little dink passes that he was playing to kind of runners and stuff like that who are sort of swarming around him. And just, I don't know if you saw his finish last night as well, but he's got an absolute kind of bastard of a shot on him as well. And like you say, you know, you don't want to kind of like fall down any rabbit holes of like whatever these kind of like stereotyping people in this sort of xenophobic way of being like, oh, you know, he's Ukrainian, so he's going to be like humble and hardworking and all this type of stuff. But, you know, you kind of, to completely go back on myself, you kind of feel like a player coming from like the Serie A, taking a step up, if you like, from, I know all the banter merchants will say, oh, sideways step from Atalanta to Spurs, but
no way.
Yeah,
That's
exactly. Let's be real. If he takes a step up to Spurs, I do think he will grab onto the opportunity with both hands. Like he does just look like a solid, hard-working player, and I do quite, because I think my one thing is like people sort of immediately think, oh, you're saying that about Maddison because he tweeted some stuff about Arsenal when he was literally like 13, 14 years old. I think he was tweeting that stuff. So there might be that stupid subconscious bit of me that's like, oh, you know, I don't want someone that's an unashamed kind of Arsenal fan playing for Spurs. But in reality, it's like, I don't really give that much of a fuck, to be honest. But like, I've never really been that wowed by Maddison. And I know it sounds ridiculous, he does have these big moments. Maddison, he definitely does. You can't escape from that. Like, there is obviously a hell of a lot of talent there around Maddison, but I can't help but get I think the best way I could sort of put it is like, I kind of get the feeling of like when Spurs signed Dempsey. Like, Dempsey was like tearing up trees at Fulham. He looked unbelievable because he was like one of their main sort of players. He was like one of their main linchpins. And I feel like Maddison, if you put him into a team where you can kind of build around him, he can be fantastic. He can be absolutely brilliant. But you've even seen at times at Leicester when he's more pushed towards the margins, he has these streaky spells where he doesn't look that good. And I feel like to come in at Spurs and to be playing kind of to having to like grab opportunities, to be competing around players like Kulusevski, around Son, around Richarlison, I'm just not sure if that's the right fit. But somebody like Malinovsky, who has less of a profile, but still has an unbelievable output. I don't know if you saw Nathan A. Clark put out a kind of one of his like web things that he does where he shows all the stats of the players, and like, you know, the lad looks brilliant. He looks really, really good. So I would like to see. Yeah, I do. I think my thing is, like, if you look at kind of they do all have their nuanced sort of approaches to the game, but I do think in like Bentancur, Højbjerg, Skip, and Basuma, we have four players of a very similar profile. Right, there are flashes, there are differences between all four of them, but they are all kind of an archetypal holding, shuttling kind of midfield that can play football a bit, can pass, can get stuck in, can do a bit of everything. but having something that's just a little bit different, I think will probably come in handy at points down the season.
Yeah, just on that Dempsey thing, I completely agree. Like, I've had this little, not to make this a podcast just going in on James Maddison, but I'm sure you'd be up for that.
He's a fucking horrible gooner, so you know.
Yeah, exactly. But I do think he does fall into this kind of. I've always had it in my head as a sort of like almost like a Lewis Holtby phenomenon, where there's like these number 10s, like I would say like Holtby, Sigurdsson, obviously less on Sigurdsson about, but there are
allegedly
there are
anyway.
Yeah. But there are these players who they look great as number 10s in like decent sides, like not so great sides. You put them into a side that's really chasing titles and top four and whatnot, and they can't really cope with not being the big fish in the small pond. And to an extent, maybe this is a little bit controversial, but I do see that in the likes of like when people are having these debates over England, like how do you fit in people like Mason Mount, Smith Rowe and stuff like that. I think even they fall into that a little bit more, because I think the way the game's going, I think we are seeing number 10s kind of losing their use a bit. Time. So I think someone like Malinovsky, like we say, like he can come in, he can play a few games, perhaps he can push himself into the team, because I do think he can play in centre mid. I'm not entirely sure on that. But yeah, we'd be better off getting someone who can drop in and drop back out, rather than you've got this like 60 million sign-in with like a millstone around his neck where he has to play. I think that would be, someone like Malinovsky is a better solution, I think.
He is unbelievable. And I mean, if we're talking about Malinovsky, and it's not, if you're looking at kind of like, look at players like Bentancur and look at Kulusevski in particular, again, two players that came with pretty much zero expectation on them whatsoever, that were just kind of, these are, I mean, I honestly, I really do. I mean, we'll talk about Kulusevski actually, because we haven't really spoken about him today, but Kulusevski to me was a player that I think the team had, the coaching staff, everybody had sort of reconciled that we're going to be losing Bergwijn. He's not happy anymore. He doesn't want to stay. We do think there's a talented player there. We want to keep using him. 5 subs next year, but the lad wants to start kind of week in, week out. Fair play to him. Let's do right by him. Ajax are there offering decent money. Great. We'll sell him, but we need to replace that. We need to replace that kind of wing option who can play across the front three. He isn't going to be demanding to be playing every single game straight away. And he's an option for the future. He's of a profile that we like, and we can build on him. But I think he's come into the team right, and he's just. I don't think anybody, probably even like his staunchest sort of supporters, people that have like backed him, like I've seen some of like Swedish Twitter who are like feeling completely vindicated that Kulusevski's showing kind of the footballing world what he's about now, after he's kind of put that Juventus spell behind him and everything. Like, it does sound like it was a pretty kind of torrid time he had at Juventus. I think there's even a goal of him like shushing the home fans and stuff when after he scored, and it seemed like he was a real sort of pariah there. But I don't think anybody really was expecting him to really look as good as he has done, because I don't know if you've noticed now, like I think on Chelsea, I was talking to Phil about it, and against Chelsea, it felt like it was the first game really where a top team had sort of thought, right, Kulusevski's one of their danger men, and they played against him appropriately and shut him out of the game a bit against Chelsea, I thought. And I kind of felt like Wolves were trying to do the same, but it's almost like he'd already immediately learnt from Chelsea. He'd sort of adapted somewhat. He'd adapted to having players up in his face, to pressing him, to pressuring him on the ball, realising that he had less and less time on the ball. And he just, again, the Kane header it hit the crossbar. That pass that he played again into Kane in that, this world-class football on display there. And I honestly, I cannot believe that we've managed to get this lad for next to nothing, right? We're talking 20th, and then maybe another 10 on top if he hits a certain milestone, which to me, this is an £100 million footballer now, like he's unbelievable. Where do you sort of stand though? Do you think am I sort of like blowing too much smoke up his arse too soon, or?
No, not at all. I think he is someone who, he definitely has the potential to, where we're talking about Son and Kane, I think he has the potential to possibly be on that level, man. Especially of Son. Like, we think about Son as well as Kane, and like I would think, how are we ever going to replace someone like Son? Because when he ages, we're going to have to spend a huge outlay on someone. And we've kind of, obviously it's on the other flank, but we kind of potentially have done that by, obviously you switch him over to the other flank, but you have someone who I think he can go to that level. And yeah, we've brought him in for like not a lot of money in this market. And one of the things which you point out quite a lot is how young he actually is. And the fact that he's, I don't know, what is he, 6 months older or younger than Foden? He's like near to Foden's
yeah,
age, right?
either one. I never know which one it is, but it's one of those, isn't it?
Yeah. And I've memorised your interpretation of him. He's either 6 months older or younger, but not interpretation.
Right, let's have a look. Let's have a look now. Right, Phil Foden. Let's have a look. 28th of May 2000. Kulusevski. 25th of April 2000. So it's not even 4 months. It's a month. He's a month older. Mad.
Wow. Yeah.
That's mad.
It's weird that he just doesn't seem like that age. It's not even that he looks particularly old. I don't know. There's just something about him. He just looks so kind of like the finished article. I suppose it's also because he's like super bulky as well, like a very like strong guy. I just don't think of him as a young player. And the scary thing is that he could get even better. And yeah, I don't think other teams have fully woken up to it yet. And it's interesting that you made that observation against Chelsea, because I kind of, maybe I wasn't looking into it as much as you were, because I kind of just thought he had an off day, but teams should be preparing for him now. And I think that is one of the benefits of us playing this 3-4-3. Obviously, you do have the fact that we have been sacrificing the midfield, and you see the negative of that against Wolves. But it does allow you to attack with Son, Kane, Kulusevski, and then you got Perisic pushed up. Emerson, yeah, let's just not talk about that as much. But you can attack with 5 attackers. One of them's Kulusevski. Yeah, I think he's brilliant, man. I really do.
And it's just, and then you got Richarlison as well that can come off the bench. You know, I think, and this is why I just think there's a lot to be kind of excited about for Tottenham this year. And look at the way the Premier League's gone so far, mate. Look at that City game yesterday. Look at Chelsea against Leeds. Like, it's got the makings of a weird. We got a World Cup in the middle
Liverpool
of it, right?
as well.
Yeah, it's going to be a weird season, mate. United United have never really been in the conversation for, the entirety of Ferguson not being there, but still, just seeing them getting done 4-0 by Brentford. But Brentford, with all due respect, like it's a pretty mad Premier League season, and it's in these kind of seasons where maybe teams can capitalise. I mean, hopefully it won't be Arsenal doing a Leicester, but I don't think there's enough there. Leicester didn't have European football. I think European football is going to kill it for Arsenal. I think things like you were saying, the guy after the guy with Conte, to me it feels like there's just a lot going on at Spurs at the right time. I think things are coming to a head at a really right time, and you don't want to hype yourselves up too much, but at the same time, we've all watched Spurs for a long time, and we know when things feel a bit different. We know when it's good, and I really do just hold on to the feeling that there's just something pretty special happening at Spurs at the moment. I think when we consider these players that we have, it's pretty unbelievable. It's pretty unbelievable that Kulusevski isn't our best player by miles, because in basically any other era he is. It's mad that Heung-min isn't our best player, because in any other era, again, he is. Even Richarlison, probably going back not even that long ago, he was Everton's best player, and that's what Tottenham were not too long ago. There's sometimes I think we just need to sort of just, because it's always moving, right? Everything is always moving, and sometimes if you can just find those little windows, those little kind of eyes in the storm, to get that moment of clarity, to just stop and kind of look an aerial picture of what it is that Spurs are right now and what it is that we're doing. I think there's so much to be happy about and so much to be excited about. And we've sort of touched on it. I probably am a bit of a happy clapper, even though I don't like to use those terms either. But I really do just think objectively at this point in time, everything is there for Spurs to really surprise a few people this year. And to me, it's great. It's great that Arsenal are getting all the plaudits again, right? They've won a few games at the top end of the season. So have Leeds. So have Brighton, you know. But people aren't talking about them winning the league, but people are talking about Arsenal winning the league, you know. These little teams, you know, they can play big boys at the start of the season, but let's see it. Let's see it when it gets down to the business end. We saw it last year. The business end, Arsenal fell away, and who took their place? Tottenham fucking Hotspur. So I think there's plenty to be excited about, mate.
Exactly, and I feel like why not allow ourselves to dream a little bit? Like, if this team wasn't Tottenham Hotspur, if we didn't have all the baggage, if it's just a team managed by Antonio Conte, it's a team with that front three. You've got people like Romero in there as well, Lloris, as you mentioned earlier. Anyone would be talking up that team for maybe league, possibly Champions League as well. Say this was some team in, I don't know, Italy or something. They'd be like, that's a great team. That should be talked about as one of the teams that could possibly do something in the Champions League. I kind of think, to an extent, the only thing stopping us is ourselves sometimes. And I think you actually you touched on this a few pods ago. I do think sometimes, does the personality of the fans of the club sometimes potentially draw us back a little bit? Like in those moments where we could have gone for the league under Poch, does it matter that we always kind of pinch ourselves a little bit and we're like, okay, don't get ahead of yourselves too much? Like, would it be better if maybe we did and we dreamed a bit more and we demanded a bit more? I don't know,
mate. It's going to be the age-old problem at Spurs until we get something over the line, and one of the big ones over the line. And this is why, you know, great day out, everything like that, but a League Cup, I get it, you get into the winning habit, but a League Cup just won't cut it, I think, for Spurs at the moment, for what we have, for what we are. We've got to win one of the big ones. FA Cup would be a great start. I'd absolutely kill for that this year. That would be absolutely brilliant, because I still rate the FA Cup to a degree. Not even the like Yadar kind of magic way and everything like that. I do just think it's a solid competition to win still, and it's difficult to win it again nowadays. So get that over the line. Fuck it, let's just win the double. Let's win the Premier League and the FA Cup. I love that, mate. That'll be a pretty decent one. But pretty decent. Fucking listen to me.
Yeah, we'll take it.
Yeah. Well, yeah, you know, no big deal. But it's been great speaking to you today, Cosmo, mate. I hope you've enjoyed it. When's the pod next out? You do it weekly and everything like that.
Yeah,
where can people find it?
We do it weekly, recording tomorrow, so it should either be out tomorrow or on Wednesday. You can follow us on all our socials at N17pod to be notified when it's released. And yeah, click follow on Spotify, N17 Podcast, subscribe on Apple Podcasts, leave us a review as well, always helps. Damn, I've really gone into that memorised little pattern there, like some kind of YouTuber, man. Like,
it's what you got to do, man. It's what you got to do. And you know, as Cosmo says, like do have a listen. It's a very good pod. It's great. You guys, you do have a lot of measured conversation. It's really, really good. So for any of you old bastards out there that just think, you know, some pod by young people, it's all going to be shouting and swearing and all this sort of stuff. It's not. They talk a lot of sense, a lot more than I do. So give them a follow, give them a listen. It's really, really good. And it's been an absolute pleasure having you on today, Cosmo. Really good to chat to you, mate.
Thank you, man. Really good to chat. It's been a pleasure.